Welcome to the What Now podcast, a podcast for people who are struggling through the 5 stages of grief. Nurse Melinda is here to show you how to embrace it and cultivate it into something beautiful. And now to assist you in the journey of life's shit show, Nurse Melinda.
Well, Nurse Melinda, how are you doing today, young lady?
I'm doing great. How are you, Mike?
Oh, I'm doing great, thank you. I am just so excited that finally I have someone to help me through Life Shit Show. And I know that you are the lady to help me through it.
I'm telling you, there is a lot of shit out there, and you've just got to figure it out.
Well, that's why we have you on the show today. I know it's going to be excellent. Before we get going, I know the title of today's show is basically Embrace Suicide. That's what we're going to be talking about. But before we dive into that, take a little bit of time and tell us a little bit more about you, who we are, your background as a nurse, and so on and so forth, and what you're trying to accomplish with these podcasts.
So I am a mom and wife, first and foremost, right? Married my high school sweetheart. We've been married for 34 years.
Wow.
And he's supported me through everything in life. But in my career as a nurse for 26 plus years, I have seen it all. I have literally seen so much struggle, but then on the other side of that struggle, I've seen so much happiness. And I think that in the times of struggle, we forget about the happy moments.
Yeah.
And so now that I'm a nurse practitioner and have went as far as I want to go because I'm getting so old, it's time for me to help the world see that there's something better.
So how did you become so passionate, involved in the topic of suicide? Tell me, what is all of that about? Have you had some experience in that area? Not you personally, but, with other people perhaps.
Well, I think all of our stories start with something personal. And I actually tried to commit suicide when I was 10.
Wow.
Sorry. I jumped off my mom's car and it didn't work. Then I jumped off the porch and it didn't work. Then I jumped off the top of the porch and it didn't work. Then I got clear up to the top of the house and I thought, well, if this doesn't work, it's going to hurt. And so I didn't do it. And through life, I've had experiences with friends and friends of family and, who have attempted and succeeded or who have attempted and not succeeded and been able to take care of people who have attempted and not succeeded and heard their stories. And so it's a topic we don't really talk about, and I think we need to. We see an increase in it every day, and I think that a lot of people feel so alone. But this podcast, I really want it to be raw. I want it to be real, and I want people to know that it happens and what happens afterwards.
Yeah. So when you had your attempts at suicide, and obviously it was unsuccessful, did you ask the question, well, what now? What do I do now?
Oh, so later on in life, I was pretty dissatisfied in the nursing world, and I was at a point where I just wanted out of being a nurse. It's a very self-sacrificing industry. Mm-hmm. And I was always reading books on how to lead without power, how to get motivated. All these self-help motivational books just always showed up in my house. Mm-hmm. I seriously have no idea how I ordered them or what. And I had 2 rooms of just books that I'd read. And I was really just done. I was just so done. And I found myself in my laundry room, and I had some cans, because it was like a pantry / laundry room, and so I had some cans in there, and I was just throwing the cans. I was making holes in the walls, and I was screaming, and I was just like, okay, all right, you have an ultimatum, and I was literally just telling God, this is your choice right here, right now. You let me walk out of here and commit suicide and be 100% successful, or you help me back up all these books and throw them away and never think about how to improve my life again. And then you let me just put my head down and be the nurse that you've guided me to be, because I'm done. This is it. I've had enough. So whatever you decide when I open this door is what's going to happen. And I'd had enough. And I opened the door and I heard, it's not 100% guarantee.
Yeah.
So I packed up every book I owned except for one bookshelf. And the bookshelf I've kept was every author of the books that I've read had signed the books. And I threw them all in the dumpster.
Wow.
And then the next day I went to work and got fired.
Oh my gosh.
I got fired.
Really?
Yeah, and then God said, you know what? I have hit you upside the head with the 2x4, and you need to start listening to me.
Wow. So what course of action did you take after that, after you got fired and got hit upside the head with a spiritual 2x4, so to speak?
I went home, and my dog had thrown up on the floor, and I went to clean it, and I just purged. I threw up everywhere, all over the living room of my house.
Wow.
And I just cried. I just was like, I don't even know what you want me to do now. Where do I go from here?
So you definitely had a now what moment.
Yeah, because it's like I lost everything. I lost my identity of who I was because I was a nurse. That when you're in an industry like that, that's who you are.
Right.
You identify as that.
So I think it's safe to say that was probably like your rock bottom point right there on the floor.
Yes.
Got fired, thrown up with the dog. It's not a good day.
And I just got rid of all my books.
Got rid of your books. And you're going, okay, now what? So what was the next step that you did to work your way through that now what moment?
Do you know what? That was such a long time ago that I really just don't know the next steps. I think that it just is one day at a time. There are some things that I have agreed to on the spiritual world and the spiritual realm of life that I adhere to. And then I don't know. I don't know the answer to that really.
Do you think?
I guess that's why one of the reasons why I wanted to do the podcast was to learn other people's stories and find out why they did it. What they did, how they overcame it.
So I knew you've had experience with other people who attempted to commit suicide. Do you have one of those you'd like to share with us today?
I will, but not today. But I really want him to be a guest, and I haven't reached out to him yet.
Okay,
so,
all right. So that's fair enough.
Yeah.
So I need to ask you, what did you do? What was the next step? Now that you had your now what moment, what did you do? What was the next step that you did? Did you rely upon some type of a spiritual awakening or assistance? What were the processes and steps that you took to work your way through it to allow you to be where you are today?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I don't know. I have a totally different, I guess I would say a different life than most people. I've had experiences like near-death experiences, things like that in my short term here on earth. And in those processes, I've been told just to show up. That's what I do. I show up. I'm told what to do and I show up. And sometimes I'm there for somebody else. Sometimes I do things that don't even make sense to me.
Yeah.
But then afterwards, I'm like, oh, that's why I was there. And it was for somebody else. And so that's kind of where all these podcast ideas come from. It has been over the years. It's like there's somebody's story that needs to be said in it. It's probably not mine. But, in the world of our experiences, we are taught there's 5 stages of grief.
Okay.
And in those 5 stages, the last stage is acceptance. And when you really think about that, there's a difference between acceptance and approval. There's totally different things, right? And I've always said that with my kids. Those are 2 different things. But when you accept something, we are taught or we're grown up or it's our innate nature as human beings to just find the positives in every single thing in life, everything. In order to get through today, I have to find something positive. And so we can literally sit and accept a bunch of shit, a whole bunch of shit. And now I got this big pile of shit. What do I do with this pile of shit? Do I carry it around with me everywhere I go and
Right.
find the little teeny mushrooms that are growing out of it as my happiness, or as, what I'm supposed to do with my life? Or do I learn to take chunks of it out at a time and cultivate it and grow it into something bigger? And I think that with Embrace Suicide, in my opinion, the 6th stage is embracing. It's embracing what you've been dealt. And it's seeing how can it change your life, their life, our life, the world, in the ripple effect.
Yeah.
It is really, it's more of that. Like, it's accepting your shit and then cultivating it, embracing it, loving it, saying thank you for it. I appreciate it. Now, what am I supposed to do with it? And that's kind of like, then what now? What now am I supposed to do?
So help me and share with the rest of the folks. What are the 5 stages of grief so we understand what those are?
Oh my gosh, I knew you were going to ask that, and I left my notebook because I was running late. So now I got to look it up.
Oh, that's
I know
okay.
the first one's denial, and then there's bargaining. And whoever's listening has already rattled them off by now. I'm sure of it. Because I had them all up there.
Denial,
Here,
bargaining.
are you looking them up? 5 stages of grief. There's denial, and then there's anger, and then bargaining, depression, acceptance. And the same lady that developed these also developed what's called the 7 stages of grief. And she added in each stage is more of an emotional thing with it. So you have shock and denial, anger, bargaining, depression, testing, and acceptance. But it just ends with acceptance. It's like, what the hell am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah, what do I do with that?
Okay, sure. I went through all this, and now I'm stuck with this shit.
Yeah. So now I'm really depressed because I've accepted how bad my life is.
Right.
So it's an endless cycle.
Right. So do you accept how bad your life is, or do you move forward?
I'm going to move forward.
Right. That's what you would think, right? But some people, maybe they can't. And so I'm hoping that through conversation and experience of other people, we can help people move forward.
I think it's a really valid point. If I might share a little bit of personal insight that I've had in my life. So believe it or not, but I have not had a perfect life. I know you're shocked to hear it, but yes, I have experienced trauma and things that have been less than great in my life. And I remember one time I was incredibly depressed, thinking, I really don't understand why the hell I'm going through this. I'm a good person. I do the right thing, or I try to do the right thing. Why are all these horrible things happening to me? I found no way out of it. And I had somebody tell me that they said, Michael, maybe this experience is only for you to learn so you can share this experience with someone else who needs it more than you do. So now that you've learned this lesson, your job is to go out and share it when the occasion arises, share this experience to someone else and help raise them up to another level. And by raising someone else up to another level, you'll actually raise yourself up to a higher level. I thought, well, that's a really good point. And I remember it was about 2 or 3 years after I had that experience, and I was all down on myself. I had the occasion to do exactly that. Somebody was going through the exact same thing I was going through, and something triggered in my brain. Oh, this sounds really familiar. And so I was able to share with them what I did, and they found it to be very helpful. So, yeah, I was shocked when the guy told me, it's not all about you. Maybe you need to learn this so you can help somebody else. So maybe that sounds familiar, and maybe somebody else out there might have that experience. So don't give up. Maybe it's kind of like being in college. You're learning something, and it takes sweat and strain, and it's painful and all this kind of stuff. But once you learn the lesson, now you've got a resource that you can use to benefit others who might be in the same situation.
Well, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of things that we experience in life that aren't for that aren't for us.
Yeah.
And if we can see that we have to experience a certain thing for somebody else, then it makes it a little bit more gracious, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I know we probably have some folks listening today who may have contemplated suicide, or maybe they have some friends or a family member who may be in that same type of position. Do you have any words of wisdom or counsel or advice or something you'd like to share with them to help them work through this?
Well, here's from my experience and from what I've seen is if there's a lot of people who will say, if I would have only known, I could have prevented it. If I would have only known, I could have helped. And the reality is when somebody is in that point of their life, there is no one who can help but themselves. They can't rescue. Nobody can rescue you. You have to rescue you. Mm-hmm. You have to rescue you from that moment. It's not from that year. It's not from that decade. It's not from, the 55 years of life. It's from that moment. You have to rescue yourself from that moment. And no matter how much we offer, like the suicide lines and things like that, there are people that are just going to be okay with doing it. So I really, if anybody's listening right now that is contemplating it, I just highly suggest you look at this 5 minutes of time in your 110-year life and realize that these moments are just moments. They're moments that you can just take a deep breath and you can say, okay, I know, there were days, Mike, that I woke up and went, oh my God, I am still alive. I cannot believe I'm still alive. Why the hell am I still alive?
Yeah.
And it's not because I didn't have a horrible life. I have amazing kids, an amazing supportive husband. I have done everything that I've ever wanted to do. That's just maybe a chemical that's going on or a moment in time where I just didn't have like the energy to move forward. My vitamin D low, is my vitamin B12 low. We don't know, but it's just a moment. It's really, that's all it is one moment. And it's so easy to, I don't know if you've ever read the book by Jeff Olson. It's called The Slight Edge.
No, I've not read that.
The Slight Edge is one of my favorite books because it's a book that says you can do it or you don't do it. It doesn't matter.
Oh.
A decision's a decision. There's consequences for either way. But you're on that slight edge of do I or don't I? And if you're on that slight edge of do I just highly recommend stepping back and just taking the breath. And, there are places that will help. There's TMS. There's Zion's Way here in St. George. I know that Zion's Way is like all over the United States.
Okay.
There are resources, but don't be embarrassed to reach out to those who offer those resources because 9 times out of 10, the people that offer those resources have been in your shoes.
That's a good point. Do you think maybe sometimes people may not call for help or a suicide hotline or something like that because maybe they're embarrassed? Oh, this is so embarrassing. Oh, and maybe, I don't want a bunch of people knowing my personal business. And is this going to be on some kind of a record? Are they going to put this in some type of a medical file, which is going to ruin the rest of my life anyway? Do you think maybe that thought process goes through someone's head who's maybe contemplating but chooses not to and even ask for help?
Yeah, I'm sure that does. There's always that if I ask for help, then somebody else will find out and they'll think that I'm unstable. But, you would be surprised at how many people I think really do contemplate it at one point in time. And I would say it's an astronomical number. We will never know how many people do it in silence. Think about it. I think that the more we talk about it, as far as just being open enough to say, it's here. This is where we're at. Will help people just realize that they're not alone. But I think that there's a stigma to it for sure. And I think that those who are like on the verge of being really serious with it, they are at the point. We are born with a fight or flight response, and our our response to staying alive is to fight to stay alive. I mean, we really do. And so when you're at that point where you no longer have that much fight is, in a sense, kind of a courageous thing, right? But at the same time, it's like you're viewed, I think people think you're viewed as being weak, but you're not. You're just tired.
Yeah. I'm wondering if maybe there's people who have contemplated suicide and for whatever reason they haven't called for help or talked to anybody. So what they do is they turn inward, and to overcome those desires and those thoughts, they perhaps self-medicate with alcohol and drugs and God knows what else, just to kind of cushion their life and just to get through to the next day. I wonder if is that a possibility as well?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure that's a big possibility. I think that we do a lot of hiding with the self-medication just to cope with life.
Yeah.
Just to cope with everyday decisions. And it's interesting because when you're in this situation or when you're thinking about it or when you're talking to a friend about it or whatever, you don't want anybody to think that you're like, ooh, I mean, I've been told you need to go to the psych ward before. And I'm like, no, I don't. Like, I recognize it. I understand where it comes from. I know how to, cope with things. But when you're like talking out loud about it, then it's more of a, maybe I should just, take some Adderall and go home or do some mushrooms and pretend that I live on a different planet. I don't know. But I guess if that's what you need to do for a minute, then, those are all, there's a high addiction rate in our country too. And I think that that's part of it. I think that we don't want anybody, we're supposed to look perfect.
Yeah.
And I think Utah is crazy all over the edge of everybody in Utah is supposed to look perfect.
Well, I know I do. So I'm fine.
Yeah.
No, you're exactly right. In Utah, there's a stigma that we're all supposed to be perfect and happy, perky, peppy people with lovely families, and we go to church on Sunday and we do all these things. And why are you not in the kitchen cooking dinner and that kind of stuff?
I know.
Yeah.
I know. There was when they were trying to rename the state or something, have a tagline. I don't know if you remember this. I want to say it was in the late 70s. That's how old I am. They tried to tagline Utah as pert near perfect.
Pert near perfect. PNP. We're pert near perfect.
PRNERT. Pert near.
Pert near perfect. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I will not be able to live up to that standard. So. I had a friend tell me one time, I think that he was contemplating suicide and he went and talked to somebody and they told him, I'll use his not real name and we'll call him Joe. And he said, the guy told me, he says, well, the problem is, Joe, is that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Yes.
So, work on the problem because you've probably got a better chance of coming on the other side of solving the problem. You don't need a permanent solution to a temporary problem. I thought, oh, that's very wise. That's something good. So
that is very wise. And, again, it's never 100% guarantee. And I've taken care of people who will never walk again.
Wow.
Who will never, who can't talk, who just basically are alive, but not. And what kind of life is that to live too,
Yeah. I'm glad that I don't have to make that decision.
Yeah.
So before we go today, do you have any parting words of wisdom and advice you'd like to share with us?
I think that if anybody is contemplating it, to just reach out to those, again, who are offering services of help with TMS or ketamine or counseling, because like I said, most of the people in those industries are in there because they've been there.
Yeah.
It's not because it's, this massive money-making scheme or whatever. It's because they've been there. And a lot of times when you have somebody that's been there, that's when you're going to find the grace that you're looking for. because when you talk to people that don't have these ideations or thoughts, they don't understand. And it's not something you need to convince anybody of or have anybody feel sorry for you, because that's the last thing we want is people to feel sorry. But the people that are in the industry have been there, they've done it, they understand it. And they're the ones that are going to give you the grace that you need. They're the ones that are going to give you the hug and embrace you and say, you know what, we got you for this moment in time.
Wow. Well, thank you for being here today, Nurse Melinda, on the Now What podcast. And we look forward to seeing you again next time with some more fabulous and wise information. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
You guys take care.
This has been the What Now podcast with Nurse Melinda. Please like, subscribe, and share. We invite you to join us next time as Nurse Melinda assists you through life's traumatic shit show on the What Now podcast.